What's going on, everybody? My name is Justin. I am here with the very first episode of the Create as Well podcast. We're calling these wellness checks. So, before even really getting started, you're probably just thinking, oh my gosh, another guy with a podcast, right? And technically, you are correct because I am a man with a podcast. But I promise you, there will be no harmful rhetoric towards women. There'll be no crazy takes on relationships. This is all about creativity, entrepreneurship, and a Christ centered lens. So I think one of the things I've been seeing over the past couple of years is the emergence of the creative. They're this emergence of entrepreneurship, this excitement to do it, right? But there's a lot of people showing how to do it, but there's not a lot of people that are showing how to do it in a Christ-centered way that honors God, that honors the people that you're serving, right? Because ultimately, no matter what your business is, you are serving somebody. You're giving somebody what they need. And in our case, as Christian entrepreneurs, we're giving people what they need from a Christ-centered lens. So whether you have a ministry, whether you have a nonprofit, whether it's a product-based business, right? Whatever it is, you are serving your audience, you're serving your community, and making sure that they're good. So that's the premise of what we're going to be doing here. We're going to have interviews. We're going to have a lot of solo ones of myself, getting used to this whole speaking thing. And this first episode, I really want to talk about me because I don't really talk about me a lot, but not in like a let's talk about me and how great I am type of thing, but like let's talk about me and how I've gotten on this journey. So if you follow the Create as Well at all, and if not, I encourage you to do so. You can follow us on Instagram at the Create as Well. You can also follow me at underscore the Justin Reeves underscore as well, and that's where you'll find all things Create as Well, right? And so, with that in mind, I started this platform to um, refresh, renew, and revitalize Christian entrepreneurs and creatives for their God-given purpose. Right? That was the goal. That still is the goal. That will forever be the goal. But I realized in that process that there's a part of me that needed to be refreshed, revitalized, and renewed as well. And I didn't really know what that part was. And I think we can get on these journeys and this excitement of entrepreneurship, this excitement of creativity, being a full-time creative, really investing in your craft. But if you don't know who you are at the root and at the foundation, then the rest is not going to go well. And I think the past year or so, I've realized that some things that were not healed or addressed from my earlier days in entrepreneurship and even before really doing this have kind of come up and in a not so good way, right? So I can sit up here and talk to you about all the highlights, and highlights are good, but I think we actually learned more from the lows. So I'll start back just kind of like a little bit of who I am. And it also helps you to know like who's talking to you, right? Because in a 90-second reel on Instagram or a 60-second short on YouTube, you don't really get to know a person for real, for real. So one of the benefits of this kind of podcast community is that you get to know a little bit more about me, what makes me who I am, and why you should follow me, why you should engage, why you should engage with the people that I bring alongside of me, all the things. So like we have more time to dive into it. So I am very excited about that. So taking it back to the beginning, I've always been a smart kid. Some would say a smart aleck. Some would say another smart A word on top of that. But I've always been a bright kid. I've always been somebody who has just liked to do things, right? I was talking about my athletic days. I need to get back to them. But I played baseball, I played basketball, and I was pretty good at them. But I never was as good as I could have been because of fear. Like there was a part of me that did not want to get super good because I was afraid of that reality, what that would be. So what do I mean by that? In basketball, I was known as a great defender, right? Like I was always stealing the ball. I was always getting rebounds. I was boxing out. I was doing all the things, right? But when it came to actually being on the offensive, I never wanted to dribble. I never wanted to be the point guard. I never wanted to shoot either. And I actually was a pretty good shooter. I believe the layups win games still, right? But I didn't even want to engage in layups. Like I just was like, nah, this is not for me. I'm gonna be the one to support someone else. And somewhere along the line, I decided that I was going to be in a forever support role. And I'm not really sure where all of that came from because I have amazing parents, right? They encouraged me, they've loved me, they've been everything that you could want in parents. They've instilled values in me, they've shown me the benefits of hard work, even though, like, to this day I'm still working. So I feel like while that was a good thing that they shared with me, I'm also kind of like, dang, like I'm now forever working because you taught me to always work. So neither here nor there. But they were encouraging, and they gave good feedback, they gave positive criticism, they gave all the things. But somewhere in me, I decided that I was not good enough to be the lead of things, right? So that early on in sports, I decided I was going to be the support. So I was going to be the guy who was the defender. I was going to be the guy who helped out in situations, right? So then, moving up a couple years, I got, still in school. I was a straight A student. I was definitely that book nerd. I would pride myself in the knowledge that I had, right? But I started to associate everything of value of myself with my brain. I started to associate with everything with like how I could produce, how well I could produce, right? And so this is important because this is going to take us into later years. So straight A student in Richmond. We moved to Roanoke. I was straight A student there. Still a good athlete there too. Still only playing defense for real. Still not trying to shoot. There were a couple games I put up some points to the board. But overall, like I was playing a support role because I knew that's where I was better, right? I had more confidence in rebounding and boxing out and steals and full court presses and whatever the case was versus my ability to be a point guard, to be a young Steph Curry, which I don't think I ever would have been that. But if I had practiced, who knows? I could be wearing a different type of shirt right now. But yeah, so my value was all in what I can produce and all of that was essentially the root of who I was. Like I was a smart kid everywhere I went. When I was in church, I always knew all the Bible study answers. Like I studied the Bible so that I could be the best. I studied the Bible so that I could just know all the answers and do whatever, get the treats, do like all of that. Get to high school, same thing. I continued on that pattern. I was the sixth person in my class of 469. Like that's a big honor for me. I was trying to be the valedictorian, didn't quite happen. IB English cut me down. If anybody's watching from high school, English was the class I actually had to focus in, right? But I took like IB math, I took AP statistics. Like I was taking all the AP, IB classes, like running myself into the ground. To be completely honest, I was a class officer. I was in all these clubs. I did some sports in high school too. So I was just that like all around, well-rounded, amazing kid. Now let's enter college. Now to be completely honest, I don't talk about college much to people. Like my college friends know what happened in college because they were there. But for the people back home, it was college was a very hard season. Like I know a lot of people are like they flourished in college, they flourished wherever. For me, I flourished in high school. I feel like I peaked in high school. Why I did well in high school, college was like a low, and like I have gradually risen back up, right? But getting into college, I went to UVA, which was back in that day and probably still is now known as like public Ivy League school. So really, really good school. Got into the engineering school at that. So I was again trying to be a high level producer, and I was going to be pre med. I was going to be on the dean's list. I was going to end up being a Rodman scholar. I think it's what it was called for the engineering version of like the best people, the best of the best. Like that is what I was aiming to do. I was like, I'm going to continue my pattern of high school of excelling and being this great person. Now, worked out pretty well my first year because high school prepared me really well for college. But after that, my second year, when I got into my major, that was chemical engineering, it was hard. And I didn't know how to react to that because I had not really studied my whole life. I had not put a lot of effort into things my whole life. I was just able to produce A plus material just naturally. Like the Lord would give me a certain level of like knowledge, and that's all I was doing. I didn't really have to push out too much. But now I'm in this position where I legitimately, am struggling to keep my head above water. And the hard thing about it was that in college, I was with a whole bunch of other students who were struggling, right? So we all were getting bad grades. We all were suffering. We all were at the mercy of the curve, which saved me so many times. Jesus, the blood of Jesus, and the academic curve were the best things of my life, like just saving me. But even in all of this, when I would come back home, everybody would just be like, "Oh my gosh, there's a smart guy. There's this. This one elder at our church always called me the professor. He's like, that's the professor. Like he does this, he does that." It was so hard for me at that moment to be honest with them, to let them know that I was struggling. So therefore, I never got the help that I actually needed. I felt at that moment that again, my value was totally attached to my ability to produce. And why am I going through all of this? I think it's important to know where your value lies. It's important to know that as a creative, as an entrepreneur, because we live in a capitalist society. We live in a results driven society. And if we don't learn how to separate our results from who we are as a person, then we are in for a world of hurt. We're in for a world of pain. We are in for stress. We are in for anxiety, depression, all of these things. And we don't want that, right? Like, we want to get to the point and get to the place where everything is properly balanced and in its proper place. And that's one of the biggest things that I want to emphasize to all the creatives at the Creatives Well. Separate your value, separate your ability to produce from your intrinsic value. You have value just being a child of God. Before you were sinners, Christ died for you. So that tells me, like, there's so many scriptures about I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Before I knew you, before I knew you, you were formed. I'm gonna get that wrong, because we're one thing we're not gonna do in this podcast. We're not gonna get Bible wrong. I know where to find it. It's Jeremiah. Um, Before you're in a mother's womb, I formed you, or something like that. I don't know. We going to get it right. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations, right? So that's what we're going for. Jeremiah 1, 4 through 5. In the beginning, Genesis 1, 26 through like 28, it talks about that we are created in the image of God. Ephesians 2:10 talks about being the workmanship of God, created for good works, created to do good things, right? So we have all these scriptures, these words that the Lord has spoken over us. But I think the biggest thing that gets me, that shows me that I had value, is before I was even righteous, before I was even in a place to even be considered a child of God, to be grafted into the kingdom, Jesus died for me. And that has been one of the most revolutionary scriptures. That's Romans 5:8. I think I might be getting that wrong too. The other thing about this podcast, we're not editing anything, because if I have to edit, it's never getting out. Yep, Romans 5:8. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. So again, the emphasis here is that intrinsically, just being alive, Jesus died for you and me, all of us who are watching this, whether you know him, love him, or not. Jesus died for you, and he wants to have a relationship with you. So you have value intrinsically. So that's, like, we could stop right there, but of course that's not where it really stopped for me, right? so college continued, and I think my second semester of second year, I got on academic probation. And I have not told like many people this, like, ever. And so for the person who had straight A's, over a 4.0 GPA, passed and excelled on every SOL, every IB exam, every AP exam, got 4s, 5s on everything, got 5s, 6s, and 7s on all the IB tests, got college credit, did all these things. I am now on academic probation. And I remember getting the email, and I remember just reading it. I was in the bed, and I just went, what do I do now? And I just remember crying. And my parents both worked out of the home, so I was at home at this point where you got the letter, and I got the information, and I was like, I don't know what's happened. And Long story short, I think the first time, emphasis there, were twice. Got on it twice. The first time they were like, "Hey, it's like not that it's okay, but like it's okay. Stuff happens. We want to put you on a plan for success." I couldn't even handle the plan for success because to go to the dean and say I need the plan for success for this was proof to me that I was not able to handle this on my own. In my entire career, I've been able to handle everything on my own. So I'm just like, my flappers were gasted. I was not okay. Like, if you like, to know college, Justin, is to know a very confused, broken version of me, right? And so I began to drink heavily. I would go to parties. I didn't even like parties. I'm not even that social, right? But I would go to the parties to drink. Never did drugs, I can say that. But I felt like had I continued down that path, I probably would have. And so when just started drinking, started like stopped working out, stopped moving my body, like gained a whole lot of weight that I still need to get off now, plus the pandemic weight, tragedy. Um, but like was not a healthy version of myself, and so kind of don't want to take too long with this. But then my third year of college, I literally was depressed. I started failing classes because I wasn't going to classes because I couldn't muster up the strength to get up. I would stay up all night watching Netflix to numb the pain, to do whatever. I would stress and do my homework. Now, here's the thing, I wasn't going to classes, but I was doing my homework. And even in that, I was doing the homework and doing well on the homework. So here's what I also want to stop and pull back. The gifts of God are without repentance. God does not revoke the gifts and the things that He's giving you. So even though I was going through a hard time, I was still very smart. And I say that because I wasn't going to class, but I could go through and I could figure out the math problems myself. I could figure out the problem sets. I was able to figure it out, but I couldn't bring myself out of myself to say, hey, you're still actually very good at this. You still have a chance. You still have the ability. But I could not see that. And there are times where you get into a situation and you need other people to tell you the truth about yourself because all you're doing is lying to yourself. You can't see the forest for the trees. You can't see the reality. And I could not see the reality. Who does well on homework that they have not been taught? Only a smart person. But do you know what I saw? That I was failing. So my homework average or my like classwork average or whatever was like a A. But when I got to the test, I was so stressed, I was so whatever, and the tests were like 30, 50% of the grade or whatever. I would just fail them. But there were some times, and this is, where if my parents watch this, they'd be like, oh my gosh. I would go to class, I would take shots before tests. It was just, whew, what a terrible time. And that would sometimes numb it, and that would allow me to just think clearly. So I do not recommend this at all, but I was doing better on vodka and tequila. But anyway, we the reason I'm saying all this is we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I am committed in this community for the Creed as well to make sure that we are sharing our stories, sharing our testimonies so that somebody else who's up and coming does not make the same mistakes that we make. Or if they do make them, to know that there's a way out of it. So also that. So I'll continue to tell these stories. I can do this could be a 5-hour podcast. I'm not going to do that. But this could be a long, we could just go in and in. So fast forward, school is just rough. I'm just in the bed. I can't get myself together. There's this Christian fellowship called One Way Christian Fellowship. It's a Black campus ministry. And I've been a church boy my whole life. I still believe in God. God is still getting me through things. And so one day I decided to go to small group, which was essentially Bible study. And I went to this Bible study, and the leader at the time is now one of my best friends. His name is Javar. And I was the only one that walked in there. And I remember opening the classroom door and being like, oh crap, it's just me. So that means I'm going to have to talk. And the first Bible study that we went through was Job. Now, I don't like the story of Job and we're going to actually do a podcast on Job because I think it's very important for creatives. And I just remember thinking, why in the world would we talk about Job? what is the joy of Job? What is the good in this, right? But there was. And so it was important for me to go through scripture about suffering, learn that life is not all peaches and roses and I don't know, berries and other stuff. I don't know. I'm a little hungry right now. Life is not all good. And I think I did not realize that because my life had been all good. I lived in a two-parent household, in very nice houses my whole life. I had to work, but I still had everything I needed and most of what I wanted. And if I didn't have stuff I wanted, it's because they were teaching me lessons to be grateful and to wait for stuff. So like up until then, everything was good, and I had to see could I still trust God in the bad. And so we'll get to the story of Job another day. But that community, which was just me and Javar, and then other people started to come. But that community was one of the things that I believed the Lord used to orchestrate my life, which is why to save my life, which is why to me it is so important and imperative that we have a community, a healthy community for Christian creatives, because this life is rough, this life is hard, it is tough. But if we can go through it together, then we can do this together. The Bible talks about common suffering among man. That not that in First Peter 4 it says that we shouldn't be um, caught off guard by like when trials come, because these things are going to happen, right? We shouldn't be surprised by the fiery darts of the enemy. These things will happen, and I think that we don't have a good enough rhetoric for that. And I think also for creatives, we need to know that it's not always going to be up. Your business is not always going to be a Fortune 500 company, right? There are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be all of these things. But ultimately, so again, do not put your value in the season and the results that you're producing. Because there will be some seasons where you don't make a single sale, where you don't get a new customer, where your retainers leave you, where things are shifting, where you're transitioning. Does that mean that you still don't have value as a creative? Does that mean that you still don't have value as a person, as a being, as an image bearer? And this is where the creative well lives. So I don't want these episodes to be super, super long. So I'm going to try to wrap it up a little bit. But after college, I got to this point where I was afraid to take risks. I was afraid to do things because now college had given me such grief, had stressed me out so much that now I felt like I couldn't do things. And I felt the Lord literally telling me to start to create as well back in 2016 or 17. For those of you who know, I didn't actually start it until 2022. So it took a long time for me to get to the point where it's like, I can still do things. I can do hard things. I can succeed at hard things. I can actually try new things. Because at this point, I was an engineering major. So all I knew was math and science, right? So what that really means for me is that I knew logic, I knew analytical problem solving. And then I realized that, because obviously I work in IT as a full time job, but that's not really what I do. Like, if you ask me what I do, I'd be like, I have a business where I solve creatives' problems. And that's essentially what I want to do through the creative world as well. Like, I want to find your problem and let's find the solution for it. The solution may be prayer. The solution may be partnering with somebody else. The solution may be taking a step back, right? Like, we need to get to the point where that stuff, where we're like, okay with those changes. So, anyway, back to this, because there's a whole lot of episodes we need to get through. And I don't want to spend it all on one. But when I started to create as well, I remember a full circle moment. And I made this shirt, Melanated Mogul, for the create as well. And I knew part of my goals in 2020. I'm going to read them off to you. Um, I think I called it Crazy Faith after Mike Todd's sermon. And of course, I cannot find it right now. It was okay. So this was September 19th, 2019. That was after his first iteration of the Crazy Faith sermon. So I said I would have a book, I would have a podcast, I'd have speaking engagements, I'd have a school for resources, I'd have a multi-purpose coffee shop and studio, I would manage clients, I would have a clothing line, and I'd be an event and talent management agency. And I said I would be the Christian Jay-Z. That was on September 9th, 2019. After I did the create as well, the Lord told me to go find this note again. So I had to pin it. And I had to see at that point that like I hadn't done a whole lot of those things, but it was because of me that I had not done them. But this year, when I was going through and doing planning and whatever, the Lord was like, "You've done a lot of this stuff. Like, I've written the book already. I don't talk about the book, but maybe we'll talk about it one of these episodes." The podcast. I've done podcast type stuff, but here I am now, finally doing it. Speaking engagements. I've done speaking engagements. The School for Resources. Not there yet. Multi-purpose coffee shop and studio. Not there yet, but I do use my basement as a multi-purpose spot for photo shoots, and we've done productions out of it. We've done stuff like that. Managing clients. I've been managing clients. Clothing line. I've got my clothing line. Event and talent management agency. I've done that as well. So part of the create as well uh, is, excuse me, part of the creed as well is also letting you refocus back on what's true. Philippians 4 and 8, it says, "Whatsoever things are true, lovely, just, and pure, think on those things." And so part of it is when you start to feel like you have no value in what you've produced, sometimes you really need to go back and see what you've done. Like you need to run down your resume to yourself. Tell the enemy, "I've done these things. These things that's on this list and it's time stamped and dated. I have done these things." Because the enemy will often try to tell you like you ain't done crap. Essentially, not to be super crass, but you know what I could have said. But you have to, and again, your value is not in the production of what you do, but ultimately, a lot of times we are producing more than what we see, right? So, I say all that to say, I'm getting to this point. I'm kind of truncating this a little faster because I'm trying to keep these around 30 minutes, but this had a little bit more background or whatever. I had to finally get to the point where I realized that my value is not in what I create and what I produce. That I had gotten into such a rhythm. And then after, so backtrack a little bit. After school, I got into a hyperactive mode of producing, right? I was everybody's everything at church, at work. I did something, everything. I would make content all the time. I would do whatever. I got into a hyperactive state to almost make up and recover for what I felt like I lost back in college, right? Because in college, I was not a top producer. I just wasn't. I just barely made it. And so when it comes down to it, after school, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." And so I started doing things for the results only. So the very first create as well I did in 2022. And this is, I've really not reflected on this publicly or any of this stuff. So y'all get the raw. It was a cool event, right? I think there were like 40 people that came, which is pretty good for an event, the first of its type in the area in which I live. And I did this event, but I remember at the end of it feeling empty and feeling like it didn't really accomplish anything. And it wasn't until I started to plan the second one, which was January of this current year, 2024. When I was in the planning process, the plan was so different than the first year, right? The first year I did it essentially like every other conference is done. I was like, okay, if I want to have a successful conference, I need to mirror what other people have done. I need to have a conference. I don't think I ever really wanted a conference. But just to say, when you're trying to do value, you get caught up in stuff, right? And so I looked at people. It's like, okay, I need breakouts, I need workshops, I need lunches, I need expensive lunches from here. It needs to be upscale, it needs to be this, it needs to be that, it needs to have these speakers, whatever, blah blah blah. And so after doing it, even while at the Create as well, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about myself at all. I was on the panel, and the panel was great. Great information was dropped. But one of the things, while I felt like I was having an out of body experience, and the Lord was even telling me during the panel, like, there's stuff that you should be saying in this, but you're letting other people say it. But you think they have more to offer than you. And you're literally the one, the vessel that I've chosen to bring this entire thing together. They would not be able to say what they have to say because they wouldn't be on this stage without you. And I think that sometimes, again, we have to take a step back and be like, I really am good. I'm really gifted. God has given me something. God has blessed me with something. God has entrusted his people with me. Whatever subsection or audience it is, God has trusted you, whether it's 10, whether it's 1, whether it's 100, whether it's 1,000. God has trusted you with his precious people that he paid for with his blood. And God is saying, I trust you to do whatever it is you are doing. So again, you have value and God trusts you. I just want that to be extremely clear. But I'm sitting on this stage, I'm sitting on this panel, and I'm just kind of like, oh, Kim Jenkins, she's got all these followers, she's so great. People should be hearing from her. There were things that she was talking about, yes, that were very unique to whatever she could do, right? But there were things that I could do. Because what's crazy is from that experience, she literally did not know me, but said, you seem like you know how to do stuff. And she had me speak at her conference that she did I think that in that coming January. And so the crazy thing about this is that oftentimes other people can see your value before you see it. And her business manager at the time told me, and she was like, you're me. You're me a couple years ago, and I want to help you get to where you need to be. If for no other reason, the creators like all things work together for the good, right? So while I didn't necessarily pour into the creatives the way that I probably should have, the Lord used that time still and redeemed it and put me in the path that I needed to be and put me with people that I needed to know and people that I needed to meet and all those things, right? So I say all that to say that God can still get the glory even when we mess stuff up. But this past Create as well in 2024, it was more of a spiritual encounter. It was more of conversation. It was more one-on-one. I talked to Ezekiel, and he and I talked about creativity. We went back and forth on like pursuing, calling, things of that nature. I talked to Brandy, who was a marketing wizard. She's amazing. We had worship. We just had a good time, right? We had a little play, skit, like all sorts of stuff. And that felt like more of me because I was actually creating something that was unique to me, that it was a way that God had given me a vision. Because a lot of that same stuff he had told me the first time. But I said, no, I need to do it like a conference. And there's nothing wrong with the standard conference model if that's what God has given for you to do. But that wasn't what he gave me to do. And even this next time when we do it next year, like it's going to look a little bit more like a conference, but it's still going to be different. Like we'll get to that later. I'm excited about it. But I say all this to say that there's a couple takeaways I want people to get in this first episode, and we're going to work through value. We're going to work through identity. We're going to work through all these things as we continue, because this is not just a one-time thing. And I really wanted to get to this shirt. But I'm going to say this about this shirt. This was the first shirt that I designed. I believe this was the first shirt that I designed, Melanated Mogul. And it just kind of came to me one day. And people started buying it. And I was cool about it. Like, I wanted to have affirmation and scripturally based stuff. Like, right? But what got to me was that I didn't wear this shirt a lot. My friends and the people who bought it, I see them wearing it way more than I wear it. And so a couple weeks ago, I said, why don't I wear that shirt? It's truly because I don't believe that I'm a mogul. And I think part of what we need to think about is like how you see yourself affects how you show up for the world. So I don't believe this shirt is selling the way that I feel like it could sell because I don't show up in it enough. Like I don't wear it enough. And two, I don't carry myself as a mogul. I carry myself as someone who's not super confident. And I'm working on that. And if you're looking at me now, you're like, you seem confident. It's an act. It's the Holy Spirit. I am so much farther ahead in my confidence than I used to be. But like it's something I still need to work on, right? And so I had to realize that I wanted to do like a Melanated Mogul Summit for Black business leaders. I'm still going to do this. There's just so many things that I want to do, but I realized that I have to find value in myself first, have confidence in myself before I even continue to do these creative ideas. Because then if they fail, if they do whatever, then I'm going to sit up and consider myself a failure. But even if you put out the event and 2 people buy tickets, that's 2 more tickets than what you would have ever had if you didn't end up doing it. And I think that's the harsh truth and the harsh reality of it, because like we want sold out events, we want all these things, and I'm going to talk about a little later in another episode about how it feels like I live a double life in a way because I'm a tour manager and I've done these really, really big shows that have thousands of people coming to them. In my events, I don't have 100 yet. So it's like, why am I worthy to carry somebody else's vision to successful completion? But the vision you've given me, Lord, why is no one coming to it? And a lot of that really is how you show up for it, how you present yourself, how you sell yourself in it. And as creatives, we've got to learn how to, one, separate ourselves from our value, but know we have value. We have value just for being who we are, not for what we produce, right? And so that's been the moral of this entire thing. Find your intrinsic value. While you were yet sinners, Christ died for you. For you, for me, for all of us. And that means that we had value. So before we even produced anything, before we did anything that was righteous, before we did anything that was good, before we even tried to live a holy life, God loved us enough. So he saw something in us from beginning that we should be excited about. This should be an exciting thing. But we don't focus on that. We want to stick on the results. And the fact is that the results are really also a product of your value. Because there are people who have shirts, and I'm not going to name them, but I think there's some things that aren't as nice as some of the things that I've put out. But I'm like, because they have so much confidence, because they know the worth, they're selling their shirts for $40 and $50, and it's the quality is actually worse. It's not saying anything. It's nothing positive. It's degrading this person or whatever. But they have so much confidence in themselves and their product and their value that other people see the value in them. So we've been talking a whole lot about value. I also said I want to keep this to 30 minutes. We're about 7 minutes over. So I'm going to wrap it up now. But we are going to come back soon for sure to continue this conversation with the creators as well. So I would love if you would like this video, share this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is actually going to help me to hold myself accountable to continue to do these videos, right? I would love if you would follow me on Instagram and hit me up and say what things that you want to, that you want me to talk about. What kind of guests. I have a whole list of things and like guests to talk to. But honestly, I want to serve this community well. So if you're somebody who's going to be a subscriber, if you want me to talk about a certain thing, let's do it. So whether it's talking about value, whether it's talking about like social media presence, whether it's talking about practical things, like we can do practical stuff, we can do spiritual stuff. We're going to do some Bible studies. This podcast will be a variety show in a sense, right? But I want it to be able to serve you all. So send me your feedback, send me your thoughts, send me your comments, do whatever, do all the things. You guys know how social media works. But yeah, so keep on the lookout. We're going to have a whole lot of content coming out, and then we're going to meet together early next year as a Create as Well again. And I'm really excited about it. I think this one's going to be extremely transformative. I think it's think of it as a work day because we come into work. But there's going to be some great facilitators there. We got some great stuff kind of in the works already. So, like I said, you can follow me on the Create as Well on Instagram. You can follow me personally at _ the Justin Reeves _ and yeah, until the next time. Wait, actually, because this is a learning community, I want you to think about this. Where is it in your life that you put value on the wrong things about yourself? And that's the question that literally just came to me. In my mind, I was like, oh, I was supposed to have a prepared kind of like homework question or whatever, reflection, but it's obviously not prepared. So where in your life are you putting value in the wrong places? For me, it's production of things. It's getting things done. For me, it's ticket sales. It's audience response, right? That's a big thing because I throw events. I produce a lot of things. So I put value in knowing that people are buying it. But to be honest, like the value is that you obeyed. The value is in the obedience. And one day we'll talk about that too. But like I said, that's it for now. Obligatory millennial peace sign. We out. I didn't expect that.